And good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to another edition of the President's Hour. I am your host, Pastor Raymond C. Dix Jr., and we have a great show planned for you today. Welcome to GMB SCI TV, and that is our station for the General Missionary Baptist State Convention of Indiana Incorporated. We have a great show planned for you today. We've got some magnificent guests. This is a heavy hitting lineup. We got doctors, we got bishops, we got it all right here on the show today. So you want to talk to anybody, share this show with your friends and your neighbors. Let them know that we are on the air. And so we welcome you to the show on today. So I'm going to bring in our guests. Our topic today is dealing with the idea or the issue of the role of denominational conventions in the 21st century. What's the role? What are we going to do? So we're going to talk about this and how these denominational conventions, whether they are really doing what we need them to do. And so we've got some, again, as I said, some great guests on here. Let's get right to the show and let's bring our guests in. All right, first up on the list is my good friend and brother. He is Bishop D.L. Brian Kim Sr., New Mount Calvary Missionary Baptist Church. As you can see, he's on the road, rolling, got a sunroof going there. New Mount Calvary Missionary Baptist Church, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he is the state bishop of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hey, Dr. Kemp, how you doing, man?
Hey, Doc, what's up? I'm blessed to be a part today and sharing with you on this day.
All right. Great, fantastic. So we're going to get your comments and your thoughts as you roll along in the on the road. Next up, we want to add my good friend and brother, all the way from the First Baptist Church of Birmingham, Inslee, First Baptist Church, Inslee, in Birmingham, Alabama, Dr. Tyree A. Anderson. What's up, Dr. Anderson? How you doing, man?
Doing well. How you doing, brother president?
I'm doing well, doing well. How things down there in the Alabama neck of the woods?
Man, everything's beautiful, man. Everything's beautiful. Just got back from Florida, and so man, I'm settling back in to this heat. And it's kind of weird because I'm outside in the heat, so I'm just gonna enjoy being outside while we have this great conversation.
All right, fantastic, brother. Let me bring in my next guest. He is none other than the Dr. D.Z. Cofield, who I had on last week, but we had some technical issues, and I wanted to bring Dr. Cofield back because he had some very good things to say. Dr. Cofield is the senior pastor of the Good Hope. Am I right?
Yes,
Good
sir.
Hope Missionary Baptist Church of Houston, Texas. Dr. Cofield, how you doing today, man?
Doing good, President Dix. Honored to be with you and your esteemed guests.
All right. Thank you so much. And last but not least, by any stretch of the imagination, is my good friend and brother, Dr. Damian Miguel Epps of the Mount Calvary Baptist Church of Chicago, Illinois. Dr. Epps, what's going on, my friend?
Blessings on you, President Dix, and thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this great battery of preacher pastors. And so I'm looking forward to hearing what each has to bring to the table in regards to our denominational work. Thank you so much for your diligence and your dedication to share platforms with us each week. So I'm excited.
Well, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The first thing I got to do, though, is I got to show Tyree, since he got his Sigma hat on. But I wanted to do that. Right. That's my brother, though. I'm telling you, y'all, that's my brother. Listen, we talked last week on the show. Dr. Cofield and we tried to have a show last week. Before we talked about the role of the conventions in the 21st century, and the local, state, and national conventions, associations, and specifically, we want to talk about what this means to Black folks, to Black church, and what's going on in our communities. I want to start out with Dr. DZ Cofield. Uh, Dr. Cofield, you were saying some things last week. We got all kind of muddled up about the convention and what you see that role of the convention to be as we go forward. Let's talk about that. What is that role of the convention in now in this day and age?
Yeah. So again, let me thank you for allowing me to be with you. I think the basic problem that we have is in defining what the purpose is of the national convention, the state convention, the associations, and the local church. And I think one of the reasons we're struggling is because there needs to be a fundamental shift philosophically regarding the role of each. In the past, the churches were created and churches gave birth to associations, and associations gave birth to state conventions gave birth to national conventions. We saw that shift change a little bit in the early 60s when the Progressive Convention began, and it started on a national platform and then tried to backfill, and it got to the state level, but it wasn't able to garner enough churches to build associations to support the national. Now the question that we have to ask is it the responsibility of the national convention to strengthen the local church, or is it the local church's responsibility to hold up and prop up the national convention? And I think once we answer that question, that's going to help us figure out what we can do moving forward. And what I mean by that is, if the goal and objective are strong churches, then what kind of association does it take to produce a strong church? What kind of state conventions do we need to have to produce strong associations to produce a strong church? And what kind of national convention do we need to have to produce strong state conventions, to produce strong associations, to produce strong churches? But if we flip-flop that and we're waiting for the church to strengthen the association and the association to strengthen the state convention and the state convention to strengthen the church, then we'll continue, I think, to be frustrated and showing up for meetings where we are adding more than we're getting, and therefore feel like it's a waste of time beyond just regular fellowship.
I think that's a relevant question, Dr. Cofield. Let me go to Dr. Anderson. And Doc, tell us what your thoughts are regarding the role of the local, state, and national conventions in our communities.
Well, this is a conversation that we just had in Jackson when we were there for the Congress. And I was in a deep conversation dealing with this last night as well. We got a major problem because I think that there is a lack of vision that we're having, not just on the national level, but all the way down to the local church. And our gaze no longer continues to be to try and make disciples, to do Christian education, to develop what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 28. Our gaze has now become so attached to what the prosperity movement has done that many of their philosophical teachings have crept into what we do. And so it's a major challenge to try and right the ship when the ship is gone so far off course. I mean, it's almost as if we got to go back to the dock, try and make our way back to the dock and start all over again. And so we need to have strong leaders, I think, at every level. But what happens is that leaders are not born, they're being identified in order to keep a status quo continue. And as long as we continue to focus on the status quo and maintaining what we got, we're going to continue to see the problems from the national level all the way down. And I mean, going further beyond the association to talk about different minister conferences in our various cities.
Right.
because it's trickling all the way down,
Right.
and people don't see the need to participate in any convention at any level because, as Dr. Cofield said, they're recognizing that they're probably adding more than they're getting back. And
Right.
eventually, you're going to find that people continue to go to, all these different workshops and conferences around the country that they're getting more from than they're adding to. And
Right.
so we got to begin to rethink what this entire formula looks like. And if we don't, then another 5 years from now, we may be having a totally different conversation about what can we build in order to bring us back together. Because I don't think that the sustainable platform that we see now is going to last.
Right.
Has to be an absolute change.
Yeah, that's a very salient point, man, and I appreciate that perspective on what we're looking at. Dr. Epps, tell
Yeah.
us what you think the role of the state, local, state, and national convention are, it or is in the 21st century as we look at the local church. Are we benefiting from that? What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Epps?
Well, I believe that the state, national, or even local district associations should feed into our churches, man, with the goal of making an impact on every level. We have missed it, whether it be on the national level, we missed it on the state level, we missed it on the district level, and even within our local church because we have this business as usual or keep it the same way it's supposed to be without ever using the opportunity, man, to allow God to expand your mind, to think outside the box, but yet remain in the Bible, or do like what Dr. D.Z. Cofield talked about, think as though there is no box, but yet stay biblically astute so that you can be able to, man, cast that vision and make that impact. When I was in Iowa, as the president of the convention, our convention was small, but our whole drive, man, our whole vision was to make an impact, a convention that makes impacts, whether it was partnering together, building bridges, whether it was shifting cultures or understanding the times and day in which we're living in, the different struggles and the various issues that's going on within our state, district, as well as national movement. And so we have the tools and the resources within our convention. We might as well use them so that we can make the greatest impact in this day and time that God would have us to. If not, we're going to see, as we're seeing, the decline of our, the decline of our National Baptist work, as well as the effectiveness and impact of our state conventions and district associations.
You're absolutely right. And you bring up again some very important points I think we're going to talk through in our show today. I want to get the opinion of our good friend and brother, Bishop D.L. Brian Kemp Sr. Doc, what are your thoughts regarding the role of the convention in this day and age?
One of the things I think that we need to do above anything is reevaluate the role of the convention, both state, national, and Indian district associations. I think the convention, being a convention baby, being a convention kid, I think the convention is still relevant. But in what way? What facet is it relevant, especially to the times that we live in now? Dr. Cofield said something a few moments ago about how the convention do the convention help the churches, or do the churches help the convention? I think the answer is yes to both. But if the convention is not supporting the local church, and if the local church is not supporting the convention, I think the convention fails, but the local church can find other means to go on. And so you hear this a lot now from the other pastors, and me moving in a different area, both in state convention as the state evangelism president. Dr. Anderson said one thing about we got to go back out, and we got to, as a whole, we're better together. That's number one, and number two, and trying to rebuild or build Minnesota also for full gospel. Pastors, as I talk to them, they're not interested in just being pimped for money anymore. They're not interested in just coming to the conventions and hearing the same preachers all the time. And they're not interested in coming to the convention and having the same lineup of classes all the time. Let's be real, many of us go to the convention because we get to see our brothers. We get to fellowship. And so I think that we have to reevaluate the role. It's still relevant, but I think we have to reevaluate the role of our state and local work. Even in Minnesota, done away with our district. We don't need a district anymore because the district was doing nothing but mirroring the state convention. Same people paying the same money, coming to just the two different meetings.
Right. I mean, you raised, Dr. Kemp, Bishop Kemp, you raised two very important points: the issue of finance and then the issue of relevance. And you always stated your belief that it is relevant. Here's a question that came up just in our discussion just now, and I'm going to put it on the screen. Does the local church need to build the convention or vice versa? And we're going to go back to Dr. Cofield. You raised this question. What are your thoughts on that? Does the local church exist to kind of build upward the state and national convention, or should that look differently and go the other way? What are your thoughts, Dr. Cofield?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer that we have to invert what has historically been in place. I think each convention, each association can play a different role if those roles are clearly defined and delineated, so that they're not replicating, they're not mirroring, they're not, in essence, doing the same thing at the same level. And let's think about this for a moment. 89% of churches in our country prior to COVID were 200 and less in size. 89% of our churches prior to COVID. Now we know that most churches after COVID, their in-person worship, they're running anywhere between 30 and 40%. On the high end, you have some that are running 65, 70% of their pre-COVID numbers. So those numbers are even lower now. So now for me, the question is, if 89% of churches prior to COVID were 200 or less in size, and by the way, the numbers are showing that we have 200 churches a week that are closing their doors. We have pastors that are selling their buildings because they can't afford the notes anymore and are going to a strictly virtual process. There are those who are looking for warehouse space to try to create a space where they can meet, but their Sunday morning experience is completely on the virtual platform. Now the question is, with those smaller churches and those smaller pastors, Good Hope is my fourth church. My first three churches, I was bivocational. It was hard for me to get to a national convention. I mean, we just couldn't afford it. You're talking about $2,000, and we didn't have $2,000 to spend. I could go to a local association. Now, I'm saying that because if each level could have communication with each other to say, hey, here's who you're going to serve, and here's who you're going to serve, and here's who you are going to serve. And this is what we're looking at. We need somebody on a national platform, for example, I think speaking to the national issues that all of us are addressing. I was disappointed, and I may be incorrect. I did not see any national bodies, for example, guiding us or giving direction as to how to effectively minister on a virtual platform. I saw no national groups speaking to the health and well-being of pastors. And all of us on this call know, man, we worked harder the last 2.5 years than we did before, right? But there was nobody that said, hey, here's some mental health resources, here's some places. And that's what we need our national bodies, I think, to guide us in terms of providing resources. I think Bishop Kemp was so right. The truth of the matter is the local church has voted with their feet. Many of them are not going or remaining tied to associations, state conventions, or nationals. They're finding churches that are coordinating workshops, coordinating conferences, and they're being fed
just
there.
kind of doing some things on the local level that helps them. Let me jump in here and get Dr. Anderson. Tell us what your thoughts are regarding this structure that we have, because it does seem to many, and I agree with Dr. Cofield. I was a bivocational pastor before I came here to Pilgrim. So what are your thoughts on how the convention should work? Should the national and the state be looking to build out and the local districts build out the local church, or vice versa?
I think that what probably needs to happen is that the local needs to focus on the state. And that what I think is probably the missing piece. Because if we just try to move from the local to the national, we miss. Like here in Alabama, we got we got a quadrant of leaders. So we got Northwest Wing, Northeast, Southeast, Southwest. They have a role in working with the local associations, and then they also have a role in working with the state president, who then works on the national level. One of the problems that I have noticed in talking with several of my friends around the country, and I do agree with Bishop Kemp, that most of the time when we are finally strategizing, it's because we finally came together on the national level in order to see our brothers, in order to talk about what we got to try and do to move things forward. At our local church, and trying things that he might be doing in Minnesota that I'd probably need to look at doing in Alabama, because that disconnect is there because, again, lack of leadership. But what I think probably needs to happen, and I think what we need to do, is we need to strengthen the local church, because without the local church, there is no state convention. There is no national convention. And that's the reason why I'm laughing, because I'm watching all of these pastors who refuse to get involved at the association level and the state level. They're going to E.K. Bailey. They're going to IC3. They're going to all these other workshops because they're getting something that they're not getting at the association, at the state, or the national level. And some of the and the very idea that I have to go outside of my religious body to get equipped is very disturbing.
Man, that's dynamic.
The fact that you got two schools, American and Virginia Union, but you push a different school that's not supported.
Yeah.
I see
exactly where you're going with that.
When you have a vision that is opposite of what has been in place, and I always keep going back to leadership. Piss poor leadership will guarantee that you're going to have a piss poor organization.
Yes.
And you can't blame nobody else but the leaders. And you know where the leaders come from? They come from those in the state conventions that the local refuses to put back in place, to put the right people in place in order to make it happen.
Wow.
And I mean, I got a chance to kind of observe from a distance what Dr. Epps was doing in Iowa. And I mean, when I finally got a chance to meet him, it was under a whole different set of circumstances. But this brother really put the work in. You have really put the work in. Because if we don't get it back to the local, the rest of it don't matter.
That, you know what, that's dynamic.
Because that's the roots.
That's
if you pull up the roots, the tree gonna die.
That's right.
And President Dix, let me say this, because I think Bishop Kent hit it on the head. The truth of the matter is, I've worked with conferences over the years. I worked with WHW. I was part of the formation of E.K. Bailey Ministries. You see Frank Ray has a conference, IC3. But the truth of the matter is, those conventions, conferences combined can't touch the number of churches that the national convention can touch, which is why this conversation is so important. I don't think there's anybody here who we don't want to abandon the convention.
No,
Right.
I don't care where it is. I mean, Full Gospel is doing what Full Gospel does, but they can't scratch the surface of that sleeping giant called the National Baptist Convention. Never have been, even at its height, at its apex. And the question is, how do we awaken that giant? And I agree with Dr. Anderson. The local church has to be the focus. If the local church and the local pastor is not being equipped, is not being fed, is not being helped, then everything that they feed into, you can't have a healthy convention and it be made up of unhealthy churches.
You're right.
Right.
You're right.
Right.
Let me do this. First of all, let me just say to all those who are watching, if you have a question for our panel or a comment you want to make, we'll try to get your comment posted up on the screen, and also we'll try to answer your questions. So we appreciate you very much being in our audience. Now, Dr. Epps, here's a question that I think that we need to look at. You have worked as a state president, and we're going to ask you to answer this too, Bishop Kemp. So just be thinking about what your answer is. How can we improve the effectiveness of our district, state, and national association and convention? Now, we touched on that a little bit here, but what are your thoughts on making this situation better? I mean, we've talked about leadership. We've talked about turnover. We talked about the pool of people where we go to get our leaders. What do you think, Dr. Epps, we can do to kind of make the district, state, and national associations more appealing, more effective? And feel free to talk about some of the things you did in Iowa.
Well, let me just say this. Now, I'm not saying this arrogantly. I'm saying this because I've seen that it worked. When I was in the state convention, well, actually coming up through the state conventions in Louisiana and then in California and then in Iowa, I always was in the back room, hearing the voices of the sages, right? But then also being a part of leadership, prayer is so key. Prayer is so key, man. We've gotten far away from that thing, that tool that God has given to us that would give birth to revival, that will give birth to restoration, that will give birth to what we're talking about now, right? But then also doing a personal assessment. Make sure that you do an assessment, because, man, if you're just switching position from one position to another and you're not assessing the needs of not just a convention, but your local church, what are the needs in your community? What are the needs in your local church? And so each pastor must bring that to the table. Once you deal with those various needs, then create a curriculum that will minister and meet those needs, that will impact, man, that particular local church, that particular local district association, and those state conventions. Most of our state conventions have 2 state conventions, and they're on 2 different sides of the states, right? Some of them have just 1 state convention, but yet they're dealing with associations underneath. Each area has a different thing that they're dealing with. Although we're Black Baptist churches, each area has a culture. It has a climate, man. Each area has something in which they're dealing with. And so you have to make sure that you assess it. Once you do that, then you gain buy-in by leveraging partnerships. And, man, once you do that and you cast that vision, finding out, okay, these are the needs. This is the assessment of our churches. Okay, this area needs to deal with expositional preaching. This one needs to deal with training leaders. This area of our churches or district association is struggling with depression. So we need classes on that. PTSD, all of those things, man. Not to say that our COP classes will not help, but the COP classes only can't be what we put out.
We have to address other things. We really have to address other things.
Need of that church, of that district, of that state convention, because guess what? We, for a long time, have come to the convention, paid our money, our registration. We've got suits tailored. We bought suits, shoes, and we come back, man, broke and yet still broken.
Broke and broken. Man, that's great.
And so there's a need, man, to make sure that we raise that standard. But you got to start with prayer. Then once you start with prayer, then do your assessment. Don't just think that just because it worked last year, mean it's gonna work this year. Last week ain't gonna work in this week's door, man. Not at all.
Let me hear from Bishop Kemp. Bishop Kemp, you have been as you said, a convention person. As you've made this observation growing up through the convention, and now as a senior pastor and a state director and state bishop, tell us what you think we can do to elevate the effectiveness of our district, state, and national convention.
Well, first I want to piggyback on my big bro, Dr. Epps. First of all, prayer is key, number one. And then I also want to answer a question that came up that said, where is God in all of this? No man is an island unto himself.
Right.
No man is God wants us to work together. God wants us to be together, especially those of like-minded faith and like-minded beliefs. So that's where God is in all of this. However, Negroes have messed up what God has put forth. So that's to that. But now let me say this again. I still deal. So like our mantra, one of our mantras at the church is the 3 R's: real, relevant, and relational. Real, relevant, and relational. The convention on national, state, and the district level has to be real, has to be relevant, and it has to be relational. It can't be about the same preachers and their churches because their churches are bigger than other churches, so they get more clout, or they've got degrees and other guys don't have degrees, so you leave them behind. When the truth of the matter is, those smaller churches, so to speak, are just as important as the larger churches. So in order to make it effective, first of all, make everybody feel equal. Our money's equal. So all of every pastor in the convention should be made to feel like they're equal. That's number one. Number two, not only make feel like you're equal, but make that pastor feel like there's somebody. Because if that pastor is empowered by the convention, that pastor will then turn around and empower the convention. Because if that pastor feels like, excuse me, he's irrelevant, then what is he really getting? And then so that pastor then in turn is ineffective towards the convention, because the pastor feels the convention is ineffective towards him. So that's that. And but the being that real part, we know scripture, we know Bible, and we need Bible. We need that. But I can't go quote John 3:16 to the hoe on the street. Teach me how to be teach me how to evangelize. I think that's what Dr. Anderson was saying. We've got to get back to what first built our churches, which is prayer and evangelism, and bring those things back into our convention. Teach us how to get back out in the streets, because and maybe your church is not an evangelism church, but maybe your church is a church like ours. We have a food shelf that services hundreds of people every week, right? But let's bring those things into play into the national convention to teach us better how to be effective in where our church is. And again, I think back to what Ep said, do an assessment of what's needed, and then the convention level and even the local church, vice versa, help one another to bring those things to fruition.
Well, I think you raised a very important issue that we haven't really talked about, and that is, what is the heart of God here? The heart of God is salvation of the lost and the discipleship of those who are saved. And when we talk about evangelism and talk about those things that build our local church, there isn't enough emphasis on those things. Now, I think our discipleship ministries has to include all the things that Dr. Anderson mentioned, Dr. Epps mentioned, Dr. Cofield mentioned, and you mentioned Bishop Kemp. You know, all of these areas of life come within what it is in making disciples. You're not making good disciples if your disciples aren't having quality mental health services addressing them. So, Dr. Epps, go ahead and comment on that, man.
I wanted to share this and just being very transparent. When we talk about doing assessments, are we really ready to receive what those assessments are? You know, the assessments to me is like going to the doctor, right? Having checkups, having your colonoscopy or whatever, you know, your checkups, man, to make sure that you're good. It's been a long time since the church has had a checkup. It's been a long time since the district has had a checkup. It's been a long time since our state or national work has had a checkup. And I think one of the reasons is because if the Lord really revealed what we assessed, if the Lord really revealed where the real issues were and are, then some of us would be in denial. Some of us would really be in denial. Some of us would really be in denial. And the bottom line is, what we're talking about is the church is sick, man. And if the church is sick, the convention is sick. If the church
is sick,
it's that the pastor may be sick.
Amen.
Look at the leadership that's leading. None of us are perfect, but we always got to come to a place where we make the personal assessments in our lives. Are we holding the church back from where God's trying to take or where God desires to take it? God gave us an open door through this pandemic. And yet the problem is maybe some members, but the problem is some pastors, some leaders that's holding the church back and holding our denominational work back.
Yeah. You're on point, Epps. Listen, let me go to Cofield.
Can I say something right quick, Doctor?
Okay, real quick, Doc.
And is this, and I want to piggyback on something Dr. Epps just said. And the three of us, along with some of our other brothers, you've heard me make this comment about my own self. This week is my 18th anniversary at my church. And I have come to the conclusion that for some things that are, for how our church is right now, I've come to the conclusion, I think Dr. Epps hit it on the head, and this is just me as a local pastor now, that I may have, and I'm praying, but I may have overstayed my welcome. And my sheep know my voice. And when they're not no longer listening to my voice, now I become a stranger. I'm everybody's preacher, but I'm not everybody's pastor in the church. Okay. Right. And so I think that same thing goes on in our national convention and even our local work, that some guys may have overstayed their welcome.
So the shelf life has expired. You don't want to go buy a can of beans and it was 2 years past its shelf life. I understand what you're saying. Let me go to Cofield here, because Dr. Cofield, you have talked about this idea of where we go in evangelism and discipleship and what the emphasis should be of our state and national conventions. Now, we only have about 15 minutes, guys, so I want you to just kind of chime in on that real quick, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then after we hear from Cofield, Dr. Anderson, I want to come to you and talk about what our role is in helping the uplift of Black people in America. Dr. Cofield, tell me about this discipleship, evangelism, what our emphasis should be.
Yeah, so, I tell our church all the time and pastors that I consult with, there are only two kinds of people in the world: people who need Jesus and people who know Jesus. And our ministry has to be simplified to speak to those two people. If people need Jesus, we need to help them know Jesus. That's evangelism. If people already know Jesus, we want them to grow in Jesus. That's edification. And that's really the discipleship process, right? Evangelism and edification. I think, though, the challenge that we have is, and I think this has been the leadership crisis that was alluded to earlier by Dr. Anderson. I have never come to a place at Good Hope where I felt like I had taken the church as far as I could until a couple of years ago. It was the first time that I ever got to the place where I felt like maybe I've taken the church as far as I can. And after really praying about it, what the Lord showed me was I hadn't taken the church as far as I could. I had taken the church as far as I had been willing to go. That I need to make a decision and a shift and a change to commit myself to personal growth. It reminds me of a music director we had in Fairmont, West Virginia, where I started preaching. She would stay at a church long enough to go through her repertoire, and then she would leave and go to the next church, and she would bring that same repertoire. And she went to 4 or 5 of the little local churches, never learned a new song. And then she started repeating the cycle, and folk was like, "Ooh, that's the good old songs we used to sing," right? But she was never committed to growth. And somewhere along the line, as pastors, I think the challenge that we faced locally, nationally, has been an emotional challenge as much as it has been a factual challenge. We have struggled emotionally with the loss of normalcy, with the loss of call and response, with the loss of the ability to minister to our people. And I think where we have to go now is recognize that our associations, our state conventions nationally have to, I'm going to add one more R to Dr. Kemp's list. They have to be resourceful. They have to provide resources. They have to tap us in to resources that we would not necessarily know on a local level, but they can address issues on a national level. They should be telling us, for example, President Dix, in your state, when the Lilly Foundation came to you all and said, "Hey, we want to help local churches. We have grants that we want to make available to help address technology deficiencies." Why wasn't the National Convention negotiating those grants and those opportunities for all of our churches? Why did we not set up resources directly with China so we could have cut out the middleman and maximize our purchasing power to say, "Hey, everybody," see, we're so busy competing with each other that we can't cooperate with each other.
That's right.
And we can't uplift each other. The other challenge that we have on a national level is, and I think it's true on a state level as well, we don't have leadership. Goes back to what Dr. Anderson says. We don't have leadership that thinks beyond the local church. So your national convention is not going to be greater than the national president's church. If his church is antiquated in its thinking and in its methodologies, that's going to play out in the national convention because you can't export what you haven't imported.
Man, that's great, man. Listen, we got just a few minutes left. I want to go to Dr. Anderson. I want to touch on this piece about helping our people. National Baptist Convention, 8 million members. That's what we say we have, Dr. Anderson. What is going on? It doesn't seem like we're making the impact we need to make on the justice issues that face the Black community.
Now you just gave me a softball pitch, right? That's all you
I
did.
one, Doc.
That's all you just did.
He threw the alley-oop up to you, T.
He sure no did. Listen, there are 2 things that I really want to kind of hit on. I had to write this down to make sure I got it. We don't preach and advocate a theology of hope. There's no hope being preached. Right. I mean, I went to the late nights during Congress. I heard. I ain't hear no hope. Then when I heard hope, everybody sat down. I heard no hope. We don't embrace a theology of hope. What we embrace is a theology of white Christian nationalism. And we try to dip it in chocolate and try to make it look like something that is not. Because once that outer covering is gone, you still got what originally was black vanilla that they made white. So you got a major problem with the theological platform, because when things were happening like with Tamir Rice and when things were happening with Trayvon Martin, We didn't hear nothing from the national level. I raised all kind of saying on Facebook, like, where's the voice being heard? Nobody's saying anything. When it came to voting, when it came to doing anything that will put us in a position of power, there's nothing. That's the first. Here's the second one. Here's the second one. We don't address social justice because social justice make folk uncomfortable. We'll talk about everything else except for the fact that a black man was shot in the back 60 times in Ohio from 90 bullets, and yet they're still silent. We won't say anything as it relates to the economic downfall of our people simply because we don't want to upset those who have put extra dollars in our pocket in order for us to impoverish our own people.
Talk, brother.
We want to have these conversations because these conversations open up to the fact that we've been getting railroaded by our own leaders for a long time, for a very long time. And it's time, and that's the reason why they're going to the E.K. Bailey. That's why they're going to the IC3. That's why they're going to Frank Ray. That's why they're going to all these other places. That's why they're going to Andy Stanley. Why are you, as a Black Baptist, going to Andy Stanley's conference? Because you believe that their situation is much better than yours, and you're going to get something from them that they're not going to give you at yours, only to realize that you just imported something that is of a foreign element. When you go to another country, they tell you you can't bring any exotic fruits and vegetables back into this country because it may corrupt the system. And we continue to read books, continue to follow, continue to listen to individuals who are corrupting us, and they're saying they love Jesus. This is one reason, I know it's going to bother some folk. I tell folk I'm not a Christian. Not a Christian. I'm a follower of the way. Because to be a Christian means that I got to embrace white evangelical nationalism. And that means that I got to bring in poison to my people. And I got to poison my people from the pulpit, which makes my church sick, which makes it weak, which means that once it leaves my church, it goes to the state level. Then it goes from the state level to the national level. And when you are not saying something that we need to hear, we're going to tune you out. Or we gonna watch you from a remote location and keep doing what we doing.
Well, you have hit the nail on the head in terms of, I mean, we need to do a whole nother show on redefining Christianity, because I don't believe that Christianity is defined by white evangelical nationalism at its root, but the way it's being presented in America is that the only Christian ethic is white evangelical nationalism. And believe me, I have worked in that environment. Tyree, you've had conversations. I have been a campus pastor at a white evangelical church, predominantly white evangelical church, pastoring a campus in Gary. And the biggest thing I saw was the disrespect for how Black theology is formed in the crucible of pain versus white theology being formed in the crucible of freedom and America and the flag and all these other kind of things. So there's a disrespect for our theological foundations that happen. But that's a whole nother show. Let me get to this thing real quick about money, because we raised this issue early in our conversation. Local churches having difficulty with the issue of money. Not just, it's more bang for the buck, because here's the thing. I'll pay money, gentlemen, for something I think benefits me or something I want. Mm-hmm. I mean, we'll find a way to get it. Am I right? We'll find it. So what do you tell, and I'm going to come to you, Epps, what do you tell that pastor that says my $200 registration, my $400 registration, my $600 registration, I don't feel like I'm getting anything from giving that money to the local, state, or national convention? What do you tell them?
Hold on, say that one more time, because I just got.
So what do you tell that pastor that says I'm paying my registration for my church, and I don't feel like I'm getting anything from my local association, my state convention, or my national convention.
When I arrived in California, I was a part of Southern Baptist because that's where my dad, the church he pastored, was a part of. When we went to those Southern Baptist meetings, because we paid into the cooperative program throughout the year, when we went to those meetings, dinner, lunch, breakfast was free. They sent us home with a ton of books, resources, as what Dr. Cofield shared earlier. They sent us home with resources, right? I've been trying to share that with us in the National Baptist and even state convention, that when people come, that we should be resourceful, that we should be the givers and not always the takers. Every church is not the same size. And so some churches do what they have to do to make sure that they send representatives to bring back information that will make the church relevant, that will make the church resourceful, but the problem is when we are taking more than giving, then that becomes an issue. One of my brothers just said through text, he said we should have allowed one of the either the president or someone from his cabinet to speak on behalf of the convention, because it seems to be an insurrection against the convention. I wanted to share that this is not an insurrection against the convention. We're just casually talking about the denominational work as a whole. And since we're all a part of the National Baptist Convention, we respect our president, Dr. Young. We respect those in leadership, have always. And so this is not in any kind of fashion to downplay or to disrespect our president or even our brothers.
Right. That's right.
Leadership. I was in leadership and still is in leadership, and I respect my leader. And but we have to have real conversations like this.
That's
so
right.
that we get back to a place where we're giving, where we're good stewards from the top down. Because we're expecting the church from the bottom up to be good stewards, but from the top down, it works hand in hand. And so you asked the question earlier about what, can the church build a convention, and can convention build a church? It happens, when both are being blessed, when both are benefiting from each other's resources, then yes, we'll grow. Right. But
and Dr. Epps, let's be honest. Okay, so when Brother talks about this as an insurrection, there's an old song that says, "May the work I've done speak for me."
Yes, sir.
All we got to do is look at the work.
Yes, sir.
When you go to a national convention, when you go to a state convention, when you go to an association, there's not one survey or evaluation done or asked for from any participants. When you go to a convention and there's not one Cash App, Zelle, or any way to give electronically, to register electronically. When you're walking around handing out printed programs on the last day of the program for the entire week, there's no insurrection. You just reporting the facts.
That's right. This is
and
just
at the end of the day,
right.
The question is, and I think Dr. Epps, you said it so well. The convention and the national convention will complain that the resources are not coming up, and the local church is saying the resources aren't coming down. And the truth of the matter is, there are more national conventions that need members than local churches need national conventions.
Man, you said something there, Doc.
Can I say something, Dr.
Yeah,
J?
go right ahead.
This is not an insurrection of our national work, but comments like that prove why we're in trouble. Yeah. Comments like that to say we are to basically do as we're told, but we can't say anything. This is not an insurrection of our national convention. It's a conversation of how we want our national convention and our local church to be better. And I think for so long we've gone along to get along. This is the way it's always been. This is the way it's gonna be. Like it, love it, or leave.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is, and this is one of, and I'm not downplaying that brother who said that, but this is one of the reasons why people don't want to be a part, because they have no voice, so we can't say anything.
That's right.
So it's not an insurrection. We all want
Well,
NBC.
let me Tyree, I'm gonna come to
Tyree,
I'm gonna come to you. Tyree, I'm gonna come to you because we're gonna extend our time a little bit, because this is good stuff. If you guys can hang around a few more minutes, this is good stuff. But let me just say this. It's important, and one of the reasons why I started this podcast was that we could have conversations exactly like this that we can share through the auspices of social media. If we can't have this conversation in the confines of those rooms that Dr. Epps talked about in the back, and say, how can we get the local state presidents and the pastors and everybody to talk about what the real issues are, then what's the purpose of doing this? We've got to have evaluation type conversations. We'll never get better if we don't evaluate what's working, what's not working. Dr. Tyree Anderson, go right ahead.
I wanna comment about this insurrection that it appears to be. My question is to the brother who said that, what do you think they're having how many conversations you think going around the country right now? I mean, this is a platform where you can see us talking about it.
That's right.
What about those that are having a conversation that you know nothing about? And this is the other piece. As a convention child, like Bishop Kemp, as a PK, one thing I learned, and I know these brothers gonna agree, when you ain't doing what you supposed to do, the church ain't gonna necessarily vote you out. They're gonna stop giving their money. So here's the question. If registration is down, if the money ain't coming in, if everybody's upset and they ain't giving their money, they ain't coming, but they spending it in these other locations, you ain't got to say a whole lot. That's evidence about what this thing looks like. Whether that's the convention when we get together in Houston, where that number go up, whether that is at Congress, where we just came from Jackson, when Dr. Cofield said it and I was mouthing it at the same time while I was on mute, that we didn't get our programs until the last day at 4:00 p.m. When you start talking about having a legit evaluation, because trust me, every Sunday we preach, we get evaluated.
Yes, sir.
Every Sunday we preach, we get evaluated. They can call a meeting immediately after church and say, we don't want you no more. That's right. The risk you take in the Black Baptist Church.
That's right.
And so to say that we can't have an intelligent, articulate conversation about what we are putting ourselves in and our churches and everything else that goes into it for us to work on the association level. And I'm an association guy. Currently, I'm the vice president of our Congress for our local association. I'm the chair of the Social Justice Commission for the Alabama State Missionary Baptist Convention. Mm-hmm. I'm doing the work. I'm working at our Selma University, which is the state school for the state convention. I'm a professor. I'm putting the work in. Should I not have a say-so about how things are going? Or should I be quiet and remain silent and suffer and deal with stress and everything, and I die, and they say, we miss him, we love him, move on.
Yeah.
I think that if we're going to put our money in, and we're going to put our bodies in, and we're going to put our families, because we got to leave our families. You got to think about everything that go into this.
That's right.
And you're telling that it's an insurrection? Nat Turner.
Well, here's the thing. Insurrection in of itself has produced a better quality product, and history bears that out.
Yeah.
America was a result of an insurrection initially, and they thought it was better to have a president than a king. So I mean, those are the things that we got to look at. Now, gentlemen, our time is getting past us, and I think this has been a great conversation. I want to leave y'all time, though, before we go, to each kind of go around the horn and kind of give a summation. Let's take a minute each and give a summation of what you like to see happen from conversations like this, what we can do going forward, or anything that's on your heart. So I'm going to start with Cofield. You go ahead and give us a minute summation, man, of some takeaways we can do from this conversation.
So I think it's very clear. We've learned over time that big churches are not healthy. Small churches are not healthy. Healthy churches are healthy. And it doesn't matter whether they're big or small. And the question is, how do we help pastors? And I think that's where the convention has to lay its head on, how we can help equip pastors and give them the tools that they need to not learn how to get promoted to a church, but how to build a church. I think most of us would agree in our seminary careers, we weren't taught how to develop a church. We weren't taught how to build a church. The last thing I will say is, the great conference leaders of our day started off going to conventions and offering their offerings to the convention, and they were rejected. Dr. E.K. Bailey, who ran ICG, who for many is the father of staffing in the Black church, went to the National Convention of America, and he was rejected by the leadership. There was fear. They were afraid. They were envious. They were threatened. And so he continued to do ICG at the time. Dr. Ralph West, man, I've talked to him on numerous occasions. Man, he would gladly see an IC3 philosophy adopted in a national convention. Like, Ralph West is not trying to be a national conference leader, right? But those efforts have been rejected over and over again. And so, the question I think on the table for the convention is, going back to what Dr. Kemp said, will it take on the mantra of being real, relevant, relational, and resourceful? Will it provide the resources that people need?
All right. Thank you, Dr. Cofield. Dr. Epps, give us a wrap up, man. 1 minute. Talk to us about what we need to do and where we need to go.
After being president of the state convention, and after serving many years in the state work leadership or national or even district, where I am, President Dix, is I just want my church to be healthy. And I want to be healthy pastor, honestly, straight up. If I can't get it from anywhere else, I ought to be able to bring it to me. And so therefore, when I connect with brothers like you guys, when I connect with other brothers and sisters in the faith that can bring their expertise to help me and to help, as what I often say, help my key work. Because when I go to the convention, I want to be able to come back and I have access to another place. I want to be able to come back and be able to impact my community. So I just really, honestly, the way the convention gets better is that the local pastor gets healthy in mentally, spiritually, emotionally. That's the way the district gets better. And then once that happens, man, then we can bring our resources together on the district level, on the state level, and on the national level. Bottom line is, a lot of guys are not healthy, man. A lot of churches are not healthy. The reason why we have an unhealthy, quote-unquote, national work is because the bottom churches and pastors are unhealthy.
All right. Thank you so much.
Wait. And just say, the brother that shared that, maybe insurrection wasn't the word that should have been you, but I'm glad it was you. But he really wasn't, he really wasn't coming out, coming for us. But and so I told him, I said, you'll provide a platform for the national officers later on to come together and to deal with some of those same issues.
Absolutely. And I'd like them to come on the show. I really would. I'd like to get our national officers on the show. I think it'll be a very important conversation. Dr. Kemp, tell us, man, give us a wrap up, man. Give me a minute and tell me where we need to go from here.
One, I think the conversation still needs to be continued. It needs to be had because what we're talking about, as it was said, in public, people are talking about in private. And so I want to thank you, President Nix, and I also want to thank Dr. Cofield, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Epps, because I think all the information that we've shared, which is not from hearsay, it's from our heart. It's from what we really want to see, and so and I wanted to say this earlier, and in my wrap up, we talk about E.K. Bailey, we talk about Dr. Ray, we talk about all these other conferences. Look who's doing them. Us. What conventions, rather be it NBC USA, America Progressive, these are all convention pastors.
That's right.
Doing things. Why are they doing them? Ask any of them. They're only doing them because they heard the heart of other pastors from what they weren't getting from the convention.
Here's what we need. That's right.
They made assessments.
That's right. Dr. Anderson, you get the last word, man. Tell us where we go from here. What do you think we need to be focusing on? And to all of you gentlemen, this ain't the last of this conversation. We're going to have to continue it. But Dr. Anderson, tell us what's next, man.
Last night I was with Dr. Kerry Stanley, and so we were talking, and Kerry Stanley passed him, his father in the ministry, my father in the ministry, real good friends. That's what we're missing. That's what we're missing. Bishop Kemp mentioned it. I'm gonna go back to it. One of the ways that we are able to strengthen our churches and we are able to strengthen our states, our associations, the state convention and national convention, we don't spend time getting to know each other.
Right.
I got a chance in New Orleans to really hang out and meet Dr. Epps.
That's right.
I got a chance to. There's a different relationship. There's a different relationship that I have with Dr. Cofield.
That's right.
Oh, we were just in Jackson together. There's a different relationship that I got with Dix from years ago.
That's
when
right.
he first got to First Baptist Church of Inslee in the north, and
that's right.
Pilgrim in Birmingham.
Yeah.
These folks are the same. They come from the same communities down here in the South. The thing about it is, if we really want to strengthen our ranks, it's going to have to take us as pastors to come together, drop all pretense. That when I come together, I don't want to have to keep saying Dr. Cofield. He need to be able to call me Tyree.
That's right.
Without putting on any airs. When we was in Jackson, I didn't keep saying President Dix.
No.
I kept saying either Ray or Dick.
That's right.
That's it. Because that's a relationship. Pastors are not building relationships.
Right.
One of the things that I've absolutely noticed about Dr. Epps is that his sons in the ministry absolutely love him. And he's taught them how to be a friend to other pastors.
That's right.
That's missing. Because everybody thinks he's trying to steal my members, sheep stealer, this, and this. Man, forget that. We're all brothers and we're all in the trenches together.
Yeah, right.
Stop all this hating, stop all this nonsense. Let's get together. Let's build these relationships, because if I need something, I should be able to pick up a phone and call about 10 brothers across this nation and ask the question, what are you doing about this?
That's right.
And I should be able to get some good answers. Cofield gonna help me out, because I got a chance to watch him do what he was doing in Indiana.
Yes.
And in listening to him, I got some questions about shifting church culture. He knows it. So why would I go and listen to John MacArthur about shifting church culture? And John MacArthur he ain't even got no seminary degree. Why am I gonna listen to somebody like that hate black folk?
Right.
And I'm gonna poison my people like that.
Right.
I ain't gonna do it. So that's my final comment, man. Let's get together. Let's get together, man. We get together. When we get to Houston, don't be acting all strange, because I am gonna tell you all.
That's right.
Because we gotta come together.
And listen, folks. That's right. Listen, he will. But listen, gentlemen, thank you so much for this time. Let me just look at a little bit of a wrap up here as it relates to our convention. And I want to thank, first of all of our audience who watching us today. Some of y'all just hung in there. You stayed with us. We went a little bit over time. But I want to thank each of these pastors, Bishop Kim, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Cofield, Dr. Epps, because this conversation is exactly what we need as leaders in our denomination, leaders in our states, leaders in our church. We need this conversation. We need to talk about how to make this better. Dr. Anderson is a member of Phi Beta Sigma sorority. And I'm sorry, fraternity. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. I got you. Don't worry about that.
I am a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Both of us pay national dues, and we get the benefit of membership. Now, of course, our national organizations don't necessarily call us and say, what do we need to do next? But we get the benefit when something is done to say, I'm supporting that work. So there is, for the pastor who says, I'm not getting anything, you are getting to be a part of a work that is kingdom driven. Now, the question becomes, is our work going to be kingdom driven? It can't be personally driven. It's got to be kingdom driven. And so I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of this show today. We're going to continue with more on the President's Hour. Brothers, I love y'all, man. I appreciate y'all. And certainly I'm praying the Lord's blessings upon each one of you. We got an outro now. So thank y'all. And thank you again, everybody who watched. God bless you. Have a great day. Tune in next Monday for the President's Hour on GMB SCI TV. God bless you, brothers.
All right, bro.
Hey, this is Pastor Raymond C. Dix Jr. thanking you for watching another edition of the President's Hour. Tune in next week for more of the same relevant talk and important information that we're going to share right here on GMB SCI TV. Look forward to engaging you on next week. May the Lord bless you and may the Lord keep you is our prayer.